No, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone taking the time this morning to join the call and hear about my presentation and for the invitation too. I actually have been a part of this organization for 5 years, and I've been a part of sharing information about the scholarship and our other opportunities and about the IR program and TC Energy. But I've never actually been asked to present about the scholarship specifically, present in a presentation in a group. So this is my first time really talking about it sort of in depth in this format. So I really appreciate this opportunity too. So like Iman mentioned, this is going to cover a couple different things, but obviously focusing on scholarship. I know most folks here are educators, um, and I'll go through it. I'm not super familiar with Zoom. I usually use Teams, so write down your questions, and we'll have hopefully plenty of time at the end to go over any questions that may have come up during the presentation. Okay, so let's get going here. Okay, so like I said, the presentation is going to cover a little bit about who TC Energy is. You may have heard our name before, you may not. What the Indigenous Relations program is at TC Energy, rather, because that's also a little bit of a unique program within an energy company. Just a brief touch point on that to give you a little bit of context. And then, like I said, going into the Indigenous Legacy Scholarship itself, the Build Strong grant funding program, that's what the program itself is called, Build Strong. The scholarship actually falls under that umbrella as well, under that program. And then we're going to touch a little bit on how to access internships or career opportunities if some of your students may be interested in something like that, where to find that on the website. And then again, maybe time for some questions at the end and my contact information if there's any follow-ups. So TC Energy is a North American energy company, and this map here really shows you what that means. So our major headquarters is in Calgary, which you can see there in Alberta, and you can see the stretch of pipelines there in Calgary. But you see the majority of our pipeline infrastructure is in the United States, and then you see a little bit of our infrastructure there in Mexico. All of that pipeline infrastructure in the United States is natural gas. We did have one liquids line. It has spun off into its own company. It is no longer affiliated with TC Energy. We are strictly transporting natural gas to where it needs to go to heat homes, power data AI centers, or whatever that natural gas needs to do to get it from A to B. So you see here, natural gas, we have about 58,000 miles of pipeline, which transports 653 billion cubic feet of natural gas and serves about 30% of the clean burning natural gas consumed in North America. So it's a little bit of a chunk of the natural gas consumption in the country. Our Power and Energy Solutions group, which is a business group inside of our company, we also they do investments in 7 different power generation facilities, also that's owned by our company, which also includes a little bit of a stake in nuclear power in Ottawa in Canada, and then there's a little bit of wind generation and a couple other things they're doing as well outside of the natural gas power generation. Overall, throughout all 3 countries, we employ more than 6,500 employees. And so yeah, that's just TC Energy at a glance, just to give you an idea of who we are and why you may have seen our name every now and then. So this is really, and it sounds a little bit corny, but I promise you this is something that really does get driven home every single time we have an internal meeting. Anytime we ever have like a what we call a town hall with all of our employees, where our CEO talks to us, our president talks to us, is safety in every step. We literally start off every single meeting with a safety moment, whether that be safety in the field where people are working in construction, or safety in our homes, especially things like, weather safety and preparedness, or now people preparing for things like, putting Christmas lights on their homes and ladder safety, just safety in every step. Literally, it's something that the company takes very, very seriously. Personal accountability, when we act with integrity in our own commitments and outcomes, working as one team. You see, it's one company in 3 different countries. There's a lot of moving parts, but doing our best to work as one team, and working for the greater whole, working together, putting our skills together to achieve more. And then active learning, that is something that's really promoted by the company to continue to learn, to continue to improve our skills and improve how we do things and do better. And so that really is part of our core values. Sorry, Iman, go ahead. Next slide. So this is kind of a zoomed in look at just the United States. And the orange areas, as you can see, are tribal lands within the United States. And the orange areas are tribal lands, which include reservations, trust lands, OTESAs, or Oklahoma tribal statistical areas, or state designated tribal statistical areas. So any variation of tribal lands, that's what these orange areas are. And I really like to show this map internally to our own functional groups inside the company so that they really understand, yes, these are our assets. They understand where our different pipeline systems are because they work on them every day. They live in these different parts of the country, but not everyone is super familiar with where are the tribal lands in this country, and where are they at in proximation to where we do our work. This is also important to what we're going to talk about in a minute, to the scholarships and to opportunities with potential grant funding, because we do, obviously we're kind of spread out in the country with where our pipeline infrastructure is at, but we're not everywhere. We're not in many states, as you can see out west, for example. We're not in every state in the Southeast, for example. So where we make our scholarship available and where we make grant funding available can't be to every single tribe across the country. It's really where we are already operating or where we're having projects. It's where we're living and working and where we're having an impact. That's where we're able to offer, these potential opportunities. So that's another sort of reference point. And again, I'll get to it, but we do have a resource on our website for when you are looking at scholarships or when you're looking at grant funding. There is a kind of map software. It's not as detailed as this, but it does kind of show you where are our assets in relation to where you live, or where are assets in relation to some of the, this reservation, or generally like, an area of the country. So you can kind of gauge like, well, am I close? I don't know. I don't know where this pipeline's at. This isn't my job. That mapping kind of gives you an idea of, proximate location and eligibility, let's say, for some of the programming. Okay, next slide. So why does TC Energy engage with Indigenous groups? I think it answers itself, but we do get this question sometimes. Indigenous groups and peoples are rights holders, not just stakeholders. They're not just another landowner. Indigenous peoples' rights and tribal nations' rights are enshrined in law and treaties. So they're not just simply another landowner that you send a landman out to negotiate with, which obviously landowners have rights, but this is they're sovereign nations, they're political entities, and tribal citizens have their own rights that are different because they are tribal nations of sovereign nations. Like I mentioned, Native American rights are anchored in laws and treaties. Also, there's the federal trust responsibility, the government's responsibility to tribal nations. And we often, with our permitting process, the rigorous processes we have to go through with air permitting and water permitting and other things that we have to go through for our permits, those same agencies are also consulting with tribal nations. So it behooves us also to work closely with those agencies to make sure they're doing what they need to do to consult with those tribes, and that all the information flow is going where it needs to go and everyone's on the same page. And our relationship is intended to build long-term relationships with tribes, both during a project, but also beyond a project, and to be responsive and respectful and collaborative, and be a good neighbor on the lands in which we work and operate. And these are the TC Energy's Indigenous Relations Guiding Principles. And these don't just apply to me, someone who works on the IR team. This applies to everyone who works for TC Energy, including our third-party contractors that may, work on our construction projects or that we hire to do work. So these are the principles that we operate under. That this is something you also can pull up on our external website as well. But recognizing the unique connection Indigenous people have to the land, resources, and their community governance, ensuring meaningful and respectful engagement with Indigenous people and governmental authorities as early as possible using a principled approach, striving to achieve regulatory certainty using pragmatic approaches in the jurisdiction where we build and operate, and then building innovative project strategies reflecting engagement and regulatory outcomes that are defensible, commercially reasonable, and community led. And getting that feedback is where that obviously too comes in. So what IR does, I like to say, is kind of, well, I would say 50-50 internal and 50-50 external, but sometimes it's, it's 25% over here and 75 and 80% over here. It really kind of depends because we do work internally a lot with our internal stakeholders and internal groups, working on projects and operations and making sure they've got all the tools they need to understand, if we are crossing or going near a reservation, or we already have assets that cross the reservation, making sure they understand what commitments we've already made through right-of-way agreements or operating plans. There's a lot of moving parts with those. And then externally, doing outreach, going out, meeting tribal leaders or, going to meetings and sharing project information or doing things like this. This is part of outreach. So it is kind of an internal external two sides of a coin. So part of that though is the community investment, which I mentioned. The grant funding program is a tool that we have. The scholarship is another tool in our toolkit. We also do cultural awareness training. Again, that's another internal tool that we use to make sure that those 6,500 employees that we have, that we're giving them the best understanding that we're able to give so they know if they're going to work in North Dakota or if they're going to work in Virginia, that they're going to know where they're working, the people who are ancestral to that area, the people who are living in that area, the people who are they're going to be working around or working on the cruise with, that they have just a baseline understanding of tribal rights, tribal jurisdiction, sensitivities, and cultural awareness to where they're living and working, and also just especially if they're going to be working on a reservation, the jurisdictions and the rules they need to be following, obviously, is super important too. And then again, the internal and external support for all of those areas that I mentioned earlier that we would provide as the IR team. So the TC Energy scholarships, the exciting part. So we have 3 different scholarship types in our scholarship program. We have a trades scholarship, a STEM scholarship, which is science, technology, what am I, you guys, science, technology, engineering, and math. I just blanked. It's early. I haven't finished my coffee yet. And then our Indigenous Legacy Scholarship. So obviously, anyone is welcome to apply to any one of those. But as Indigenous students, we do encourage them to apply to the Indigenous Legacy Scholarship just because we get less applicants to that one even if they're going into a trade, we get less applicants in that Indigenous Legacy Scholarship than the trade scholarship if they weren't Indigenous, if that makes sense. So there are 40 US trade scholarships and 40 Canadian, 40 STEM in the US and 40 in Canada. And then there's 100 US Indigenous scholarships and 100 Canadian Indigenous scholarships that go out each year. Now, something that's new as of this year, and then in the foreseeable, I think this is going to keep going, is there's a heightened focus within the Indigenous scholarship of STEM and trades within that scholarship. All that means is that there's a target that they would like to reach of 70% of those students having a STEM or trades major or study focus, I guess. But that being said, they're still going to hit that 100 no matter what. It's just a preferred target that they would like to hit. So that being said, if your student does have a trades, career goal, and that's what they're, submitting their scholarship for, they're going to score higher, for example, than someone who doesn't have a STEM or trades. That doesn't mean they're gonna, if they don't have a STEM or a trades uh, uh, focus, that they're not going to get a scholarship. It just means that they're not going to get bumped up just that much more in the review process. The all the scholarships open in January. It's usually mid to late January, and then it closes in May. The student must be enrolled in the upcoming fall semester. So, obviously, if it's a trade, it's got to be a trade school or a certification program or whatever that is. Um, and then for this, if for someone who's not in a trade program, they could be an undergraduate, graduate, they could be getting their PhD, they could be getting their bachelor's degree, they could be getting their associates. It doesn't matter what level of education they're in, is what I'm saying. That doesn't make a difference. Um, so yeah, it could be any level of education. Um, and then if they are awarded the scholarship one year, it doesn't preclude them from applying the next year and being awarded the next year. That they could be awarded year after year after year. If the application is good and um, they're submitting and they're getting awarded, it doesn't preclude them from continually being awarded. Okay, next slide. I think I have some additional information. Yeah. So this is just some stats from last year, and this also includes Canadian numbers as well. So the numbers are a little tiny on here. It's a graphic, so please excuse the size. But and this includes the trades and STEM numbers as well. But the numbers on here on the where you see the map, it's the total number. So you can see uh, the scholarships awarded by gender on uh, the Indigenous peoples. So the bottom left, the second graph, the second circle there for Indigenous is really almost 50-50. It's pretty close for male and female, pretty evenly divided there. At the top graphic in the corner, the top right, the numbers, like I said, it's 100 Canadian, 100 US. And then Mexico, I forgot to mention, by the way, we do have a separate scholarship for women in technical. That's Mexico's own scholarships too, and that's a new one that they've developed in the last couple of years. But yeah, total overall since the program started, um, we've had a really good response. The program has grown every year. Um, and so I know that makes it more competitive for the students, but for us also, it makes a easier argument for us to go to our leadership to say, look at the demand, look at the need. We need to expand the program. So at least we can make the argument every year. Whether they do it or not is never up to us. But at least we can always say, the need is there, the desire is there to expand the program because it has grown and it has been successful especially over the last 4 or 5 years. It's really grown through applications. So this is just the next couple of slides are kind of a snapshot of what kind of the criteria or kind of the questions kind of look like, the program itself. So the evaluation criteria focus on leadership, community involvement, not just on academic performance. I know sometimes students get a little nervous about that, especially if, maybe they are coming from like a trades background and they think, well, why am I applying to something that like someone in a PhD is going to be applying for? Like, what chance do I have in getting something like that? We're not just looking at like GPAs or something like that. We are genuinely looking at, asking questions about, how are you involved in your community? What does this scholarship mean to you? How is this going to impact, you getting, following through on your career? How are you going to give back to your community? Like, we do look at those things and read those things and take those into account. There's also questions about students receiving financial support and their financial need. I think I go a little bit into that in the next slide. But the students do receive the money directly. So the check goes to them. It doesn't go to their financial institution. So they get the money directly so they can use it however they like, whether that be books or gas money or rent or whatever that is. It's $5,000, and it is for that fall semester that they're going to be enrolled in. So it's not a huge amount. It's not a massive amount of money, but it's something that could make a difference, that could alleviate some sort of expense during that semester. And again, that goes to them, so they can decide how best to use it. Um, and like it mentions here, there's no other third party organization involved in our scholarship program. So when the students contact me, or Tiffany Morning Bull is currently the person that oversees the scholarship program specifically. She sits in Calgary. When they talk to Tiffany, they're talking to the person that oversees the program directly. When they're submitting their applications, it's Tiffany who's compiling. So there is no other third party middleman or something like that in this process. Yeah. Okay. So here's a little bit of a snapshot too of some of the questions that they might see on the application. So it's going to ask, are you enrolled in a post-secondary institution? That's where, they're going to need to be enrolled in the fall semester. And once they are, they get through, that approval, and they're going to need to prove that they are enrolled. They're going to have to show some sort of proof of enrollment, to get the funds. Um, and then again, I mentioned earlier, are you located in a community near TC Energy's operations or projects? There's going to be a drop. There's going to be a a bar where they can type in their community. So if they type in Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, it's going to auto populate that. So even though they live in San Diego, California, but they are Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe tribal member, they would be eligible for this scholarship because they are a tribal member of a tribe where our assets cross that reservation, if that makes sense. So even though they might be going to school in Florida, but they are a Nansemond tribal member from Virginia, they would be eligible for this scholarship. So I would not recommend typing in. It says address on here. I would recommend typing in their tribal affiliation, their tribal enrollment, because that would be their best bet. And if they're having issues with that, they can reach out. Everything should be uploaded in that database to kind of auto populate in there, for the tribes. But if there's any issue, we can look at it on the back end. And then they're going to be asked if they're a citizen or permanent resident of which country. And then, of course, if they're a dependent or employee or a consultant of TC Energy, if they have a connection to the company. And then I think there's another slide with a couple of additional questions that they might see. Yeah, they're going to be asked financial need, annual monthly costs over tuition costs. Be sure to include information like, rent, associated living costs, car payment, utilities, groceries, insurance. If they have dependents, if they have children, or they're doing elder care, um, uh, or people who they're responsible for. That's also taken into account as well. And there might be one more slide I'm thinking of. Yeah, this one. So, and this is interesting. This is something that Tiffany added too as a suggestion. So please let us know how you're receiving the scholarship will help meet your educational or career goals. So an example response would be like, the money will help me pay for tuition and books. That's an obvious, response, and that answers the question. But a suggested improved answer would be, are you supporting a dependent, children, or helping support other family members? Will the funds enable you to focus on your education, avoid taking out additional debt or part-time work? Do you travel a long way to class? And will the funds help you pay for your car or your gas? Will the funds make a difference between you being able to pay and stay in school versus dropping out or taking care of other responsibilities? So really, the more detail and just sharing, the better. The more help it is for us when looking at the applications. And I'll touch on the Build Strong grant funding program as well. So we do have a bucket of funding specifically for the Indigenous Relations team that is separate from the regular, I'll say the other Build Strong grant program that we have. It's the same amount of money, but this money is just specifically for Indigenous causes. And again, it's dependent upon proximation to our assets and our projects that we currently have. You have to be a nonprofit or 501c3 or directly through a tribe. And the same as the scholarships, it usually opens in mid to late January. And we try to wrap up in mid to late October. So we're actually winding down right now. We're doing um, our final reviews right now with the program because we want to make sure the funds get out by the end of November because it is we say a 3 to 4 week process to get the check cut and mailed to people. So that's also kind of needs, is built into the system to think about in terms of lead time, because there is a little bit of lead time. Sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's not. But anyway, we do try to wrap up all the applications by this time every year. For funding, it's usually really easy for us to get things funded like equipment, supplies, sponsorship for events. This picture off to the left is actually one we did recently with the Chitimacha tribe of Louisiana. It's their fire department. So they bought new hoses and nozzles for their hoses. That was a really easy one to do. It's just equipment that they needed. They also were looking at fire retardant clothing, that they needed to wear. So those kinds of things were easy to supply through our program. We do have we do have focus areas that the application needs to fall under. So safety, which is it really has to safety could be anything, but for us it has to kind of fall under first responders like fire departments or police forces or something like that. Environment, education, or resilient communities. And when it comes to Indigenous relations, our bucket of money, resilient communities is where we usually have a little bit of wiggle room because the resilient communities for Indigenous peoples could come in the forms of powwows, could come in the forms of cultural events, could come in the forms of uh, uh, we did one recently out west where there was an event for, they're preparing for the Christmas season. And so they needed funding for some housing insecure people and some food insecure people. And so they wanted to make sure that the children had gifts and they had food on the reservation. And so like those are some things that, there's a little bit of wiggle room that we can work through on that. Um, so we just need to make sure that whatever it is kind of falls in one of those buckets, and it will ask you in the application which bucket it falls in, and go from there. We can't fund anything that involves construction of brick and mortar, buildings. We can't fund anything that goes to an individual. So if you're saying, well, we're hosting an event, which is a cultural event, but we're looking for funds for people to stay in hotels. We can't fund something like that because it's money going to a person, to an individual. It's really money that's going to be shared through the greatest number of people. It's going to benefit the greatest number of people. That's kind of the rule of thumb. But if you have any more questions about the grant funding program, what is possible or is not possible, or if you have ideas, or what we could or couldn't do, please reach out to me. It's also super helpful when you do have an idea about something you'd like to apply for, to reach out ahead of time too, just so I know, because I try to manage the budget every year. And that's always, I'm probably preaching to the choir in terms of managing budgets, but um, it's just kind of keeping in my head sort of what we can probably do and what we probably can't do, and the timing of that is super helpful for me. And so I can probably give you a good recommendation on the timing and sort of what to apply for. So feel free to reach out to me on that, and we'll see what we can do. So, like I said, you can find on our external website, you can find information about the grant funding program and scholarships under what's called social impact, on our website. And you can see here on the top right corner, it's a banner on the top, social impact. Click that. There's going to be a bar on that black bar on the right hand side of the page. You click on Build Strong. or apply for funding. It's going to take you to, or click on Build Strong. It's going to take you to the grant funding or the scholarships. And then you can navigate from there. And then the for the Build Strong grant program, again, when we if there is any interest in applying or curiosity about the grant funding, we can talk more about it too. But just as an aside, if you do apply for grant funding, there's two buttons. One is apply for funding, and one is apply for Indigenous funding. And you want to click on that second one because that second one means the application is going to go directly to me and the IR team to review, and it won't get lost in the mix somewhere before it makes its way to me. So that's the right button to apply for that. And we'll touch a little bit on internships and careers. So as you can imagine, for a big company like TC Energy, there's all kinds of different internships and career opportunities, from everything from like construction and engineering related to HR and Indigenous relations. I just went to the ACES conference a couple weeks ago in Minneapolis, and I had a bunch of students ask me who are way more, smarter than me about like mechanical engineering and asking me questions about that. And I said, I am not an engineer. I have a degree in history and anthropology. But those are great questions. And so actually made a mental note that next year, maybe we need to bring an engineer to the ACES conference so that they can talk to an engineer one-on-one, because we had a lot of people ask questions about that. But there's a lot of different people with a lot of different educations and backgrounds. So I just kind of took a snapshot here of just, an example: engineering roles, finance, human resources, supply chain, information technology, risk management, strategic planning, management, policy development, geoscience, environmental science, technical operations, maintenance positions, field technicians, operations specialists, maintenance crews, safety supervisors. Um, these are all different kinds of different kinds of positions that either are careers that are being posted all the time, being generated on our careers page all across our footprint, all across the United States and Canada. And there's also internships in some of these positions that are being offered also in Canada and the US. So and I put it in here, I would recommend creating a profile on our careers page if you're at all interested. It's something you can create. You can set alerts for. So if you're interested in a certain part of the country, you can set it for North Dakota. You can set it for Montana. And you can set it for a certain type of job. So you don't have to continually check back at the careers page. It'll just alert you when a job or something pops up, and then you can see if it's something you want to apply for. And I think on the next page, I have a little bit additional instruction for the students. Yeah. Okay, so on our careers page, again, it's going to be on that top white bar there under careers in the far right. If you go to that page, if you go to search careers, which is that blue button, search careers, it'll take you to just our general page because you didn't type anything in. It's just everything and anything under the sun with TC Energy. If you go to that page, you go down to job category and you click student, it'll filter everything just for students. It'll filter just all of the internship opportunities for the students, if that's something that they're interested in. They are seasonal. They're like I think 3 to 5 month term sort of internship opportunities. And I haven't ever worked with an intern. No one in my department hasn't, so I'm not super familiar with the program. But I know that we have had a lot throughout different departments of the company. So just when I checked the other day, when I did the screenshot, there were 58 student opportunities listed. So it's just something maybe to check out if that's something that people are interested in. And again, I think that's something you can also set alerts for. I'm pretty sure you can. So if a student might be interested in that in a certain field, that's something that they could say, I'm interested in mechanical engineering type of work or technical operation type of work. That's something that they could set an alert for the job or internship opportunities. Okay, I talked a lot. Hope I didn't go too fast. I'm free to take any questions. Here's my email. If anyone has any additional follow-ups that you didn't think of, or again, if you have any questions about anything after the fact that you want to follow up on, feel free to email me. But yeah, if anyone has any questions now, feel free to jump in.
Can either post them in the chat or just come off mute. I guess
Oh
I
yeah, and
you,
Selma posted the link for the community giving.
excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so one of the things that like our group, we do like a lot of like career kind of activities at tribal colleges, and like I don't know how much you know about tribal colleges, but there's like a lot of like stop out issues and where students have to kind of go to work or take care of families, and sometimes that means like they gotta drop out of school or whatever. But so like one of the conversations that we have in this group is that each of the TCUs doesn't always have like a fully functional career service department. So like we're trying to figure out ways that we can at least do some like baseline kind of services, like such as helping build resumes and things like that.
Mm.
Like, do you guys have any programs that like maybe multiple partners could like get involved in to kind of meet that need and just kind of like what overall projects, like what is the scope of some of the community projects? Like I know you mentioned the fire department or whatever. I think most of the reservations have like some kind of volunteer type of fire department or whatever, but maybe just the scope of different funds or projects that you fund be interesting.
Yeah. So for to your first question about, like a program like you mentioned, that would sound super interesting. So TC Energy doesn't have something specific like what you mentioned to like build out, resumes or career, career development, something like that. We don't have anything like that currently, but if let's say for example, you brought in a organization that um, you was going to help you do that and we could help assist that, so we could either maybe help fund that through the college, like we could help fund the program through the college in some way shape or form. We could talk about what that looks like, sort of what would we be funding, um, or we could go through that organization that would be doing the program. What we would be limited to is like we couldn't pay for, let's say, you're going to bring in Joe Smith, the expert, to come in to talk to the students, to sit down with them. We couldn't pay for Joe Smith's travel costs or Joe Smith's fees to come do that because he's an individual. But if if there was anything like um, you need to feed everybody while they were there. They need steel-toed boots. They need their high vis. They need some of their equipment paid. They need equipment to do the job that they're doing. We could help with that. Um, we could help with excuse me. We've done programs before with I think we've maybe even talked about this too, with laptops for individuals, where we've essentially worked with a company called, or an organization called CompuDopt, where they have handed out laptops to people um, for like a digital literacy program, and the people could take the laptops home and work on them and get better. And they were being trained at a facility, but they could take it home and practice. And that was something too that, and then they kept the laptops. That was something that they could keep. And then CompuDopt kind of kept a contract with them. So if they had any technical issues, they were like on call to help them with it. Uh, we did um, we did another one recently with a tribe in Virginia. Excuse me, with updating their museum artifact database collection, which was super outdated from like the 70s. And so that fell in their resilient communities sort of focus area, because it is part of their cultural heritage, and it needs preservation. And so we helped with their database upgrades that they needed. Um, there was also another organization that was a tribal education consortium out east. They needed something as simple as a printer, right? But that made a huge difference to them, just being able to like have a functioning printer and being able to churn things out quickly, we help them with grant funding to purchase something like that. So it can be something kind of as small as that to something larger like funding for. I'd say some of the larger ones we've recently done the last couple of years have been community events like sponsorships, like powwow sponsorships, um, things like that for like big, feeding a ton of people and needing a lot of supplies for these large events that get expensive pretty quickly. Yeah, that's something that usually the costs go up pretty quickly. Um, but yeah, I'd be happy to actually just wrote out a list not too long ago for a very similar question in an email. And I kind of tried to pick a few different variations of things we funded. I'd be happy to find that list and get back to you on
Oh,
some
awesome.
different like various things. Yeah, because it does. I mean, needs are various, right? Like it's not always the same thing, and people are creative with how they come up with wanting needing to pay for things. So we try to fill that gap basically.
If you do get send me that list, I'll post it. So like I leave these Google Docs up like all
Oh
the
yeah.
year. So like I'll just copy and paste that list into there too so that people can see. Um it looks like Anselmo has a question here too. He said, what about like PPE for agricultural program, boots, hard hats, gloves, safety glasses, things like that?
Yeah, yeah, PPE, that's definitely something we can do. But in Arizona, I would say might be hard just because if you look at that map, if you look at that map at the beginning of the presentation, TC Energy doesn't have any assets in Arizona. I think we have one teeny tiny little bitty pipeline in the southwest of Arizona, but we can talk about that, Anselmo, about where you're located at, uh, to see more location information. Because generally speaking, like New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, like we just don't have a ton of footprint over there as a company, so it's hard to Oh, in La Plaza in Yuma, TC Area 14. Okay, great. She's on it. Yeah, you already posted the region. Sweet. Yeah, we can talk about that some more. But yeah, PPE, that's easy. That's an easy one to do. Boots, hard hats, gloves. It's equipment that a large group of people are using. So yeah, we can fund equipment like that.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, that's true. Workforce students, yeah, trades. I mean, that equipment, like you mentioned, like even things like boots, hard hats, gloves, safety glasses, that adds up quickly. I just went to I was doing a site visit with a tribe at a compressor station. I was told to buy 5 or 6 high vis vests quickly and 5 or 6 safety glasses, and I walked out of the hardware store. It was like $200 just just in that. So I mean, things like that are super expensive, and I know that's not something that for everyone can just buy out of pocket. I mean, that adds up really quickly.
Does anyone else have a question or comment? Awesome. Well, I'm gonna stop the recording.